Hey, Rick, what did you eat last night?
I had a pea, zucchini, and mint soup.
Ooh.
I know. It was actually really simple because the peas were frozen and the zucchini I just chopped up. And you do it with a little bit of onion, a little bit of garlic, salt, and pepper. And then you just fry all that up a little bit. And then you put, the broth in. And then I just immersion blended it. And it was really good.
Did you use fresh mint?
Yeah.
That sounds delicious.
Super.
I mean, peas and mints really love each other. That's cool.
I was surprised because I thought, I'm not sure if I'm going to really like this, but it just seems super easy. And I had just about everything. I had to go buy the mint on the way home. But I'm like, wow, what a great soup.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, simple.
Yeah.
How about you?
I had a cauliflower rice stir fry.
Ooh.
So I made the rice out of cauliflower. So cauliflower rice is sort of in quotes. So you just, and I think we might have talked about this before, it's the same kind of thing that I made for the cauliflower pizza crust, but you just put cauliflower in a food processor and pulse it until it's the consistency of rice, and then you treat it as rice. So I just use that as the base, and I season it up with some onion and ginger and garlic and sauce, and then make the stir-fry topping of just whatever vegetables and whatever stir-fry sauce you like, and put it together, and I really like it a lot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's just so good for you. It's a way to get that cauliflower in and kind of disguise it a little bit, and also it really does absorb sauce in a similar way that rice does. So
I don't make stir fry on my own because I feel like, because all I really know to put in is soy sauce. And that's it. And it never tastes very good. You know what I mean?
Soy sauce, rice wine vinegar, sesame oil, and I like tamari, which is similar to soy sauce. It's also kind of a little bit
tamari,
like fish sauce. Yeah, and that would do it. And a little heat of some kind, maybe sriracha or something like that.
Oh, nice.
That makes a very nice, simple sauce.
That's something I have to branch out and really do more of, actually.
Yeah, it's a great way to use up what's in your fridge, too.
Perfect. Yes, totally. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of You Won't Believe What I Ate Last Night. I'm Kate DeVore.
And I am Rick Fiore.
And this is our ongoing conversation about food, health, weight management, and our endeavor to be and stay healthy in a really tasty world.
With love, kindness, and compassion towards ourselves and others.
Today, we're talking about labels. Inspired by our interview with Kristi Churchvara that we aired on the 1st of this month, we're going to continue our conversation about food labeling and also the kinds of labels that we attach to people. So, see how we're getting a little metaphorical here, you guys. Let us know what you think about this. This is what we're doing.
Living on the edge, people. Living on the edge. God forbid we relate food to life. So, Kate, let me ask you, in your week or the time since that we did that episode, have you done any shopping? And have you had any experience with or without labels?
I have.
Oh, my God.
But mostly because I have followed Kristi's advice to mostly buy foods that don't have labels, which is largely produce. So I made a killer stir fry with my Amish Miller chicken and just a whole bunch of veggies. And I made a gochujang sauce and I made that up a little bit. And then I have been obsessed with farro. You and I have just recently discovered farro and how much we just completely love it. So I had some leftover black bean sauce from So this harkens back to our last month's episode with Penny of recipe creation. So in this last week, I made up a recipe for chilaquiles, which included a recipe for black bean sauce that I partly made up and partly didn't make up. And then I had some left over. So last night I used some farro and black bean sauce, and then I wilted down some spinach with some garlic and broth and red pepper flakes. And then I mixed that all together and I poached an egg and put it on top and put a little avocado. And it was so unbelievable. And my egg had the humanitarian label on it. I like we didn't talk about brands last time, but I like Phil's eggs. The brand Phil's is the only brand of eggs that I've found that actually has that humanely certified label.
Nice.
So I've been thinking organic eggs were just as good, but after last week, after talking to Kristi, I now understand they're not. And so I'm more interested in the humanely raised thing because they still don't have antibiotics. They still don't have all that other stuff. So Phil's eggs was the only thing that had a label, I guess, in that. Well, and I guess the farro, I don't know. It's a grain. It must have some kind of processing, but I didn't pay attention, to be honest.
What I loved about that episode when we recorded it is it was so important for you to know that the chickens were frolicking. And that's so important. It's huge. Like, this is a really great idea when we look at these labels on our foods. We all get that eating happens and meat eating meat is going to happen. It's not something that we're going to stop or we should particularly stop, but to really do your work and know that that animal lived the best possible life from birth to, as they say, slaughter. It's really important work that I think we should all be thinking about.
And it's, if anything were to make me a vegetarian, my body likes meat. It really wants
Agreed.
meat.
Yeah.
The only reasons I want to be a vegetarian are those ethical animal husbandry reasons. So I would do best by having a small farm supplier. Like that would just be my fantasy, is that I can always get all of my meat and eggs from a place that I know I trust.
A small farm.
Treats their animals properly.
Yes, a small farm you can go into. You're more likely to know the people. And this sort of leads us to the other point, big thing that Kristi made, right? Is as you go about purchasing, particularly your meat products, the things that lived at one point, you've got to go in and be able to ask about the food. Where does it come from? And what life has it led before it made it to your plate? Such an important question. So I always think about the fact, like, I get a little nervous sometimes when I think about going in and doing that. So, because I'm like, oh, what are they going to think? Oh, it feels weird. I'm like, am I asking the right question?
And it's a tie-in to what we talked about in our response to Penny when we talked about the recipe creation, and she said cooking is about being a little brave.
Yeah.
And we talked about bravery, and sometimes the things that we feel brave about are silly to feel brave about, because why should you be scared? But that's a great example of talking to your butcher and asking those questions about the rearing of the meat.
Yeah, a great point. It's so true. And for me, it is a very brave thing. Absolutely. So we want to make sure when you go into the stores, we know that you want to make sure that you're talking to someone, ideally in a management position, right? To find out who has the actual information. A lot of floor people in these small places have all the information, but if those people on the floor don't have the information, make sure you keep asking and getting to someone who does have the information that you want and that you need.
It's so interesting. My mind just totally, I was listening to you, but my mind also just completely wandered to something else, which is, why is that scary? Like, there's no rational reason for me as the consumer to feel nervous about asking the shopkeeper about the provenance of their product. And then it made me think as a teacher about the things that my students might feel intimidated to ask me about when there's no logical reason why they should. And it just suddenly made me feel a whole lot more compassion for my students and clients, and how they might feel brave just asking me a question, even though from my perspective, it's like, well, of course you should. Like, that's your right. That's your job. In fact, it's not just your right. It's your job. And so as a consumer, it's our job to do that. And yet it still feels strangely, I don't know, is it about challenging authority? Is it about, what is it? Well, why is that scary?
When you said that, what came to my mind was, it just, for me, I feel very vulnerable asking that, because I still, this is my own thing, but sometimes I think, oh gosh, they're not going to want to answer. They're not going to like that I'm asking the question. They're going to think I have some alternative motive. Like, that goes through my head. And again, there's no rational reason for that. Very interesting.
Or they're going to think I'm silly, like that Portlandia sketch about the chickens.
8 to 4. Now you have to highlight it with people.
You know what I'm talking about? I think it was on the very first episode of Portlandia, if you haven't seen it, but they're at a restaurant and they're asking about where the chicken came from. And it goes to the thing, like, they come up with like what its name was, what it liked, what its favorite color was. And then they ended up going to the farm. And it was a whole thing. But it was making fun of this exact thing of wanting to know, what did it eat, and taking that step further.
And I've been behind people particularly in restaurants that are asking those questions. And the way they go about it and the way they ask it, it is like they portrayed in that Portlandia sketch, where halfway through their questions, I'm like, shut up. Just stop asking questions. Minimize your questions and get more specific about your questions. Don't ask all those silly ones.
Exactly. Surely you have gotten the information you need by now.
Exactly. I think the other thing that's really important is, particularly if you go to a place that you go to often, whether it's a small farm or, I tend to shop at smaller stores and they're not huge chains. It's really great to go in and say, listen, I love your store. I like everything you do. To really offer a compliment, right? To say something positive about what they're doing. And to say, to me, it's just really important that I know where I spend my money. And I try to spend more and more of my money on people that are doing right by animals. Like, that's just a great way to start. I think it's something people will understand. It also gets your viewpoint across, which helps me. Like, it helps to contextualize me in relation to them. So I think they'll just see me for what I'm really concerned about. So I think that's a great way to start too, when you want to ask these questions. And I would say, and this also means that it doesn't mean you don't want to shop, right? You don't want to give people the impression that you're not going to shop there. if they don't meet your needs. This is all about education, and we're still early into this whole thing. That you want to educate them. You want to know what's important to you, and they should ideally, keep wanting to make improvements. But you shouldn't be like, I'm not going to shop here.
I'm not going to shop there if they don't meet my needs. I'm not going to buy my meat at a place that doesn't sell humanely raised meat at this point, or meat that at least I think is humanely raised, because there's some guesswork involved. Yeah. But even at Whole Foods, I've had this conversation with people about pork products. Do you have any pork that's humanely raised? Because that's a really hard one to find. And I don't even want to go into it. We didn't talk about that one on the podcast. That's the one that breaks my heart the most, about the pigs. And I just can't even. And so even they were like, no, we just don't. And I'm like, okay, so just so you know, and they don't care. No. Whole Foods does not care that I'm not going to buy my meat there. No, or at least the guy behind the butcher counter doesn't.
Exactly. Totally. And God forbid, I don't want to walk into a Safeway or a Giant and start asking these questions. I'd rather stay home and drive an ice pick underneath my fingernails than do that.
Wow.
Tough times,
All right. Well, I'll go to Safeway. You can do that, because I don't know about that. Speaking of self-love.
I loved what she said in the interview, that basically food, what you put in your body, is just an expression of self-love. And then more self-love you have for people, the more self-love you have for yourself, that's just going to trickle out and affect all the people in your community. And just how important it is to think, you got to love yourself with food. That what you put in nurtures your body, feeds your body.
You got to love yourself with food. That's a great sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's a theme, right? I think everyone we've interviewed, including the ones that haven't aired yet, have talked about that.
Agreed.
That the way you nurture yourself by what you eat affects how you are in the world.
Yeah, valid point. I just think about all of the terrible things I put in my body at some point. So when I say terrible, I'm generally, for me, talking about volume. The amount that I put in my body, even of stuff that we might label bad, it's just really the quantity I got stuck.
Do you mean good? Yeah. I mean, even good stuff. It's the quantity of good stuff.
Both. Like if it's good stuff, or even when I'm eating pizza, like I'm not going to take pizza out of my life, or whatever anyone might consider bad, which might even be like that terrible processed cheese dip that I love. Like I like it, but the fact that I can put in so much in my body in one sitting, that's where I get a little bit caught up. And that's where I feel like, I'm really not loving myself. Because I do think there is this idea of loving yourself with pleasure, right? With the flavors, even if they are processed. And then,
absolutely,
but to stop, because when you eat too much of it, it becomes this sort of abuse that you're heaping onto your system.
It's so true, especially with something like that, for example, like that waxy. It's like, I've sometimes thought, I'm just putting like wax into my intestines right now. Yeah.
Totally.
I don't even like that cheese stuff you're talking about, but my version of whatever that is.
Yeah, totally.
You used a word that I want to come back to a minute ago, which is stigma, which is a great word. And it ties into some thoughts that I had on talking about labels that we apply to people, to ourselves and others as well, which I think is really interesting. So a label is defined as a descriptive or identifying word or phrase. So there's nothing intrinsically good or bad about a label. A label is simply a way we describe something. Yeah. And we obviously have to do that because we have so much information that we process that we have to narrow it down. And we're trained to use language. And so when I see a dog, I think dog. Or when I see someone that's happy, I think happy, and it's a way to help process stuff. So labels aren't necessarily bad. I think it comes down to a couple of things. One is, what's your intention in labeling? And then stigma is certainly one of those things. So I wanted to talk a little bit about pros and cons of labeling.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, just this whole idea is, how do we really separate what a label is, right? Which you just described so wonderfully, and the step that happens where something becomes positive or negative, right? And for me, I just think of so many labels that I use in my life that I like a lot. And then there's a lot that I don't use. So one of the things I always think about it when it comes to label is, what are the labels I use for myself in relation to my activities, in relation to how I go about the day? And I'm always really, particularly in my meditations, I'm always looking to understand what are the labelings I'm using and which ones serve me and which ones don't. And then how do I think about letting go of some labels that are no longer serving? Because this is the thing. It's sort of what we were talking about earlier. When it gets to this point where it becomes a stigma, it's so tough. The minute that sort of quality or energy comes onto a word or a phrase, it is tough to get back to the original meaning of what the label meant.
Totally. So let's talk about what some of the advantages are to labeling. We've talked about, obviously, just the fact that our cognition can't handle all of that random information, and we have to give it a word in order to be able to process it. So there's that. We also have a shared vocabulary. If I talk about a table to you, you have a basic sense of what a table is.
Yeah.
Right?
And also with labels, I mean, it's sort of the way we're brought up, and it's sort of the way we learned. We're taught to label from the minute we're super, super young. That this stove is hot.
Spoon. Exactly.
This fork, feeds, right? The idea that what's outside.
Mama, Papa. We're taught to name things right away.
Yeah, exactly. And, for good or for bad, I mean, we're also taught that, like, I always think one of the labels is what's outside the door. Like, that's always something that was I taught is not good. The unknown on the other side of the door is bad, which is something I was just taught as a young kid, right? You don't open the door. You don't open the door to strangers.
Really? You mean literally outside your physical door?
Thing. You've got to be very cautious about what's on the other side of the door when you open it. It's still something I think about today where I live because, Kate's been...
Rick Fiore, that is fascinating.
Kate DeVore has been to my place, and the amount of times we're walking up and down my hallway, and this just happened the last time you were in town. I'm always like, I feel like no one lives where I live. I never see anyone. It's very quiet.
No, it's a little bit like The Shining in your hallway. But
we got
you're welcome. Now that I know you have a thing about outside your door, that was super nice of me to say.
That helps. We got on the one time in my place, we got on the elevator, and again, no one was there. You hadn't seen anyone in my place for days. We got on the elevator, and you just stood there and you said, "Does anyone live here?" It was so funny.
It's true. He lives in a community of like hundreds and hundreds of co-ops, and like I've never seen anybody else there. It's true. It's true.
So to this day.
Right. So back to labeling outside is scary. That's fascinating, Rick. Wow. How amazing that you're as bold and brave and friendly as you are, given that. That's really interesting.
Thank you. It's not always easy. Thank you for saying that. It's a lot of work. Because
totally. I get it.
And this is one of the things I always say a lot when I'm working with people is that one of the single most challenging things we have to do as a people as we age is to stay open to what's on the other side, to the unknown, to what's outside the door, to new experience. It is the single hardest thing to do because our history tells us that it's going to be a lot of work. It's not going to go well. Oh, I don't have the energy for it.
Whereas I feel like I have the opposite experience. I was taught that what's on the other side of the door is possibilities and excitement and interesting. So I don't find that hard. So exactly. And yet here we are together. That's interesting. Although I guess it was a mixed bag. I think both of my parents were one was real adventurers and really bold and really brave and wanted to play and explore. And yet, because of reasons of their in their souls, I think that's what their spirits are. Their spirits are brave and bold and fun and playful and adventurous. And they've had experiences in their lives and upbringings that made them a lot more cautious and frightened for very real, legitimate reasons.
I get that. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm a product of that sort of hybrid, but I feel like I picked up the adventuring element.
Thank God. Like, that's really hard for me.
Yeah, well, yours did not show you that in the same way.
It's work to be adventuresome for me. You know what I mean? I feel like, it's a risk. Like, and I do it. It just is a lot of effort for me to do it. And this goes back to the whole labeling thing is, does the label serve that you're using? And if it does, great. If it doesn't, oh, well, you really got to think about that because labeling keeps us safe, right? The dynamic we were just talking about can either keep you safe and move you forward, or the labeling can keep you scared and keep you in.
That's right. It comes back to the one word I put in block caps in my notes is what is the intention of the label, which is exactly, I think, what you just talked about. Does it keep you safe or does it make you brave? What did you say? That's not what you said.
I just said,
that's
does it keep you in? Does it keep you out? Like, does it move you forward or does it not? Yeah.
That is so brilliant. Like, that is what it has to come down to. Another advantage of labeling is that labeling emotions, for example, can be really helpful. So once you know what you're feeling, then you can deal with it. So my mother, who I haven't talked about in weeks, it feels like, used to say to me as a child when she was like, "What are you upset about?" And I'd be like, "I don't know." And she would say, "If you don't know, who should we ask?" And it would drive me crazy. I hated it, but it was actually really helpful because it would help me to name it and label it. And once you realize what it is, well, I'm angry or I'm sad or whatever, it sometimes just makes it dissipate. It can really be helpful to just identify what you're feeling, which I think can then in a larger sense fit into community. A word can really help you realize that you're not alone also. So like if you're a little transgender kid in a super religious community that never talks about what that is, and you're super confused about who you are and what you are, and then you learn the word transgender, like, can you imagine how liberating it might be to realize that what you are has a name? I think that naming can be very powerful.
I'm going to agree with you, Kate DeVore, 99.9%. And the little percent's just, throw caution to the wind. I'm thinking back to when I realized that I was gay. I was like, I came of age in the 80s, and gay, not so much the awesome label to be called gay. It's very different than kids now who are able to label themselves as gay. Because back then, when I came of age, which was, right at 1980, the height of at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, gay was it was used so terribly and was thrown around in such vicious ways. Not the way it is now. I'm like, my God, the idea is that a kid can come out gay at 13, 14, 15, and it has just a different social context. Like the way it can change the trajectory of their life and how they perceive themselves and how others perceive them. And just now that so many people can use a word gay and it doesn't have the connotation it did when I was growing up, which was, it generally meant disease. It generally meant someone that had to be kept away from you, someone you can't commune with. So powerful.
Well, I think that was an amazing segue into the next thing I was going to talk about, which is what are the cons? We talked about the pros, the advantages to labeling. What are the disadvantages? And one of them is stereotypes. And that's one of them. And another one is that it can be misunderstood. And so those are great. Like, what does feminist mean? Like, does it mean you hate men?
Yeah.
No, of course it doesn't. But, that can be the perception.
Totally.
And if you're gay, does it mean there was remember when there was this big gay pedophilia confusion when people thought that all the gay what I mean? Like there was this thing that happened. And so there was all this weird confusion between those kinds of labels. And so when it's not clean and when it's not clear and when it's misunderstood, it can cause a world of hurt.
And when it's thrown around casually without a lot of, as you said earlier, intent about what does the label mean and why are you using the label? It's super important. That's why what's so great is when you think about all these terms, particularly, in relation to the last election, the words that are used in relation to women, they're very important, right? What does feminist mean? What does, the big B word mean? In other words, we can extrapolate. And I just think that's so relevant.
Totally. And I think one of the things that I noticed the younger generation, the
you
youths
did not
doing
just
now,
say that.
I really did, is being much more aware of not labeling other people, allowing everybody to come up with their own labels. And I think it can be very empowering to come up with your own label, remember, queer used to be a horrible insult, and now it's been reclaimed by a segment of the population. And then there's a segment of the population who still doesn't want to be called queer, and that's cool. They don't have to call themselves that. You know what I mean? But the idea that we can all call ourselves whatever we want. I, for example, don't mind using the word girl for myself as an adult woman. And I know a lot of people are offended by the use of the word girl for an adult woman. And I used to be like, no. And then I went through a phase of, I'm going to reclaim that. I like girl. I'm okay with girl. And so it's about personal choice and not judging other people's labels and not assigning them.
Not judging other people's labels and not being so determined that they're going to use the label that you want them to use, either for themselves, for you, or for others. It's really unbelievable.
Well,
that's a lot.
There sorry, our people. We're labeling you people.
We're labeling you
whoever might be
people.
listening. Perhaps people have left this podcast on for their dogs or cats. And so...
Hate the more. Well, as always, we thank you so much for listening. And hey, listen, we would love to know what you think about labels. Is there a label that you've been assigned that other people that you don't like or do you like? Let us know. Send us an email, or you can send us an audio file to youwon'tbelievewhatIate@gmail.com. Also, remember, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram at You Won't Believe What I Ate. And let us know your thoughts. Like our episode. Tell your friends to subscribe. Awesome.
And let us know what you think about our new format. So now we're doing an interview at the first one of the month, and then we're doing a discussion for the second one of the month. Let us know what you think about that and how we can make your experience better, because that's really ultimately why we're here.
Thanks, guys.